This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Macheli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. China expresses full confidence in hitting this year's growth target and unveils plans for $28 billion in spending and investment projects from 2025. Now, the move disappointing investors are banking on stronger stimulus from Beijing, cooling the week-long rally in Chinese markets, with Hong Kong stock benchmark recording its biggest fall in 16 years. Singapore and South Korea to elevate relations to a strategic partnership next year to mark 50 years of diplomacy, with a focus on trade and artificial intelligence. Kim Jong-un accelerates plans for North Korea to become a nuclear superpower, with Seoul detecting signs that Pyongyang may be building an atomic-powered submarine. Shigeru Ishiba to make his international debut as Japan's Prime Minister at the Asan Summit in Laos, where he will reportedly meet China's premier and other leaders on the sidelines. Also in East Asia tonight, fancy a 5-day tour of Shanghai with your pooch? How about taking your fur kid to a boxing match in Thailand? We look at how some firms in China are taking pet travel to a whole new level. China's top economic planner has expressed confidence in the country achieving growth goals for this year. Senior officials outlined further plans to address challenges in a news conference following a slew of stimulus measures announced at the end of last month. And for more, we are joined now by our senior correspondent, Olivia Seong in Beijing. Hey there, Olivia. Well, tell us a little bit more about this news conference. It was highly anticipated, but did it meet expectations?
The short answer is probably not, because of the reaction that we are seeing, that stock market rally cooling after the news conference took place. And that's also because of how high expectations were, given the whole slew of stimulus measures that had been announced at the end of last month. We were talking about rate cuts to key rates, as well as boosting liquidity to boost the property market and the equity markets as well. And this is after we saw economic indicators miss expectations in August, and GDP growth in the second quarter of the year slide to 4.7%. But even as today's news conference was wide-ranging, it covered plans to boost consumption as well as foreign investment, capital markets. But what analysts I've spoken to have said is that it has been short on specifics. Many had been hoping for measures on the fiscal side, but that was not announced. Have a listen.
Steady and progressing. That's how the chief of China's top economic planner described the country's current economic situation. Calling for a holistic, objective and calm perspective, he expressed confidence in meeting China's GDP growth target of around 5% for this year. This even as he acknowledged a more serious and complex external environment and stronger downward pressure at home, adding that some industries are in a state of involuted competition.
那么综合分析来看，我们从发展的当下 和发展的态势来看，我国经济发展的基本面没有改变，市场潜力大、经济韧性强的这些有利因素、有利条件也没有改变。我们对实现全年经济社会发展的目标任务充满了信心。我们对保持经济社会平稳、健康、持续的发展呢，也充满了信心。
Among the plans outlined by officials was a pledge to continue issuing ultra-long special treasury bonds next year and bring forward the implementation of investment plans worth 100 billion yuan or $14.1 billion earmarked for next year. A list of projects worth another 100 billion yuan for implementing major national strategies and security capacity building in key areas will also be released.
接下来我们将和 各部门各地区一起全面贯彻，加快落实党中央国务院的决策部署，系统落实一揽子的增量政策，打出一套组合拳， 政策在出台后，我们还要注意打通政策落实过程中的堵点和卡点，扎实推动经济稳定向上。
The news conference comes a day after China's week-long National Day holiday, where officials pointed to high levels of consumption, improved market sentiment, and a stock market rally following a slew of stimulus measures announced at the end of last month. This even though market expectations had been high for more measures on the fiscal side to be announced.
Well, I think the NDRC's hands are pretty tied. They have their own portfolio. They are not the Minister of Finance. They are not in charge of fiscal policy. I think those are still coming in the later days, probably before this month ends. What they can do is to signal that they are on board with this turn in the Chinese policy making, trying to focus more on the economy, trying to double down on what they've already announced in terms of policy measures, trying to implement the policies better.
Without providing details, officials did reiterate that there's a need to ensure necessary fiscal expenditure and to speed up the process, adding that more efforts should focus on promoting consumption and supporting people's livelihoods, also helping businesses tide over difficulties.
And all eyes next will be on the coming weeks, whether we will see more policy announcements from authorities, particularly the Ministry of Finance, as mentioned there, whether more measures will be announced to sustain this economic momentum. We'll also be looking out for a gathering of China's top legislature. Its top standing committee expected to meet at the end of the month. There, analysts are expecting where fiscal stimulus measures, if any, could be announced and approved. Ateli.
Olivia, in the meantime, how are people reacting to these efforts?
Well, Ateli, when you go out to speak to people, whether it's in big cities here like in Beijing or even in the smaller cities in other parts of China, what they agree on is that the economy is not rosy. They have faced difficulties, some of them, whether it's with income or finding jobs. But where they seem to differ is on how much this government intervention will move the needle and change their livelihoods and the outlook for them. Now, my colleague Tan Zihui spoke to some people here in Beijing, and here's what they had to say.
大家呢，等于说，对这个疫情3年还是比较担忧，但是现在看来，我觉得，整体还是比较好，所以呢，大家现在手里还是挺多钱的。但是呢，就是怎么说哈，因为全球经济都不是好，不是太好，大家有一点迷茫。
国际形势这么复杂。 那个中国在这大的环境当中，经济能怎么样了呢？对吧？唇寒齿亡，对吧？危如累卵，这真的整个世界经济都这个样子，中国能好到哪儿去？
我觉得中国人都挺勤劳的，然后你像我们都很努力工作啊，我觉得对未来还是比较乐观，很有期待。
Well, over the National Day holiday, we did see reports of a jump in property sales and inquiries following a slew of measures to boost the troubled market. These include cuts to existing mortgage rates and the easing of housing restrictions. Some cities even offering promotions for potential home buyers. We also saw that stock market rally that we were talking about earlier today. But there are others who continue to remain concerned. Now, some observers that I have been speaking to say more needs to be done to boost confidence in what's called the real economy, or to address some of the fundamental long-term issues that have plagued China's economy, key of which weak domestic consumption and investment, as well as jobs. The unemployment rate, as we saw in August, for young people especially, reaching a new high of 18.8%. Now, this was addressed during the news conference today, but officials said that it is normal for there to be a flow in labor from low to high productive industries when economic transformation takes place. But he did say that there was still plenty of jobs in new industries, including electric vehicles, as well as in the low-altitude economy, like for drone operators. But whether this will boost sentiment and whether this is enough will remain to be seen and depend very much on what further measures are announced in the coming days and weeks. Ateli.
Well, we shall wait and see indeed. Thank you so very much, CNA's Olivia Seong, reporting live from Beijing. Singapore and South Korea have agreed to work towards upgrading relations to a strategic partnership next year. Well, that's when both countries mark 50 years of diplomatic ties. The two sides are looking for more substantial cooperation in areas such as trade, connectivity and cybersecurity. Well, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol is in Singapore for a 3-day state visit, and Claudia Lim has this report.
A busy day for President Yoon started with a ceremonial welcome at the Parliament House. He then called on Singapore President Tharman Shanmugaratnam, who described the relations as, quote, at a whole new level, as both share a common interest in promoting a free, open and inclusive international order. It's a sentiment shared by Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, as he says bilateral cooperation is excellent. Under the strategic partnership, both sides will look to upgrade their free trade agreement to better meet the needs of their economies in the current digital age. Air services could be expanded to strengthen connectivity and ride on the strong demand for such travel. Other areas of increased cooperation being looked into include defense, education, AI and cybersecurity, and climate change.
We were both Asian tigers that successfully transformed our economies. Korea, of course, has done this on a much bigger scale. Having experienced such rapid transformation gives our two countries a deeper appreciation for what we have today.
아시아의 발전과 번영을 선도해온 우리 두 국가가 이제는 AI, 디지털, 녹색 경제 분야를 아우르는 오늘 왕 총리님과 저는 양국의 우호 협력을 더욱 미래지향적이고 호혜적으로 발전시켜 나가는 방안을 심도 있게 논의했습니다.
The leaders also witnessed the signing of an extradition treaty, as well as deals in areas covering supply chains, LNG procurement, food safety, and developing startups. The cooperation is expected to expand regionally as well.
South Korea and ASEAN celebrate 35 years of dialogue relations this year. PM Wong says they are looking at ways to strengthen the free trade agreement and air services agreement. Further discussions are set to take place at the Asan Summit in Laos later this week.
President Yoon's early sessions of the day ended with a visit to the Botanic Gardens, where he had this orchid hybrid named after him and his wife.
Coming up on East Asia tonight, Samsung offers apologies for disappointing investors in its quarterly profit guidance as it lags its rivals in the AI chip race. Plus, China slaps levies on brandy imports from Europe and studies raising tariffs on EU automakers in an escalating trade row. Good to have your company on East Asia tonight. Recapping our top story this hour, euphoria in Chinese stocks fizzling out after a Beijing policy meeting ended with few details and no major stimulus. Well, Roland Lim joins us now with more on the market reaction. Roland?
Sally, well, mainland stock markets did open with a bang today. Shanghai, Shenzhen, the blue chip CSI 300 all saw gains of more than 10% in early trade. But the rally lost steam as the day went by, as investors saw little reason to press with the rally in the Hong Kong markets during the Golden Week holiday. That's after Beijing held back on releasing any more stimulus at a briefing today. Mainland indices ending the day off their session highs. Hong Kong's Hang Seng, the biggest loser, tanking close to 10%. That's as its heaviest loss since 2008 during the global financial crisis. Anticipation for an opening pop had been building given the rally in Hong Kong listed shares following a raft of stimulus measures before the Golden Week holidays. And there were some skepticism from market watchers who waiting on Beijing to back up its pledges with real money. The World Bank has warned that China's slowdown may deepen even with its recent stimulus policies. The lender estimates that China's GDP is set to drop to 4.3% in 2025 from a projected 4.8% in 2024. Chinese officials had set an economic growth rate of about 5% for this year. Well, with lots to unpack. For more, we are speaking now with William Ma. He is Chief Investment Officer at Grow Investment Group, and he joins us from Singapore. William, good to have you on our show as always. Now, there was a lot of build-up in expectation by investors for Chinese economic planner to unveil new measures. Was the market jumping ahead of the gun, do you think?
Well, as a fund manager, actually, I'm very excited and happy to see the outcome today. Because if you look at the Hong Kong market over the last 3 weeks, it's obviously overbought. Some of the stock is up 25% in a day. Some of the stockbroker, actually, they went double, in 3 days. Despite their earnings, it's going up 30%. So a lot of, leverage money, hedge fund money is in the Hong Kong market. On the other hand, I'm also happy to see the China market opening up and up 6% today instead of going down with disappointment. I think there is a lot of hype building into the policy expectation, and the key is there is no one particular figure. A lot of people is waiting to see if it's a 1.5, 2, or 3 trillion physical stimulus, which will be announced, later on. So in short, I think what happened in the market is a bit more realistic so that the long-term recovery of the equity market can be more sustainable.
Well, policymakers are obviously keeping their powder dry. Do you think that the fiscal stimulus package, when it's announced, will be forceful enough to spur the markets further higher?
Mean that they can come in.
Okay, we seem to have lost connection with William. We will try to bring him back a little later on in the show, if that's possible. China is set to impose temporary anti-dumping measures on imports of brandy from the European Union, just days after the bloc voted for extra tariffs on Chinese EVs. Beijing says the dumping of brandy from the EU is threatening its own sector with, quote, substantial damage. Now, starting this Friday, operators are required to pay security deposits ranging from 34.8% to 39% of the import value into Chinese customs. Now, this will make it more costly upfront to import brandy from the EU. France was seen as the target of the latest moves due to its support for tariffs on Chinese EVs. The European nation accounted for 99% of China's brandy imports last year, with shipments reaching $1.7 billion. The French cognac industry released a statement saying that, quote, all should be done to avoid the duties. China's Commerce Ministry says that the probe into pork and dairy products from the EU was still ongoing and that it was considering a hike in tariffs on imports of large engine vehicles. Now, such a move would hit Germany's producers the hardest. Shares in European spirit companies, did fall following the announcement. Remy Martin is currently down 8.4%, and Pernod Ricard 3.8% lower. And Samsung has apologized for issuing a weaker than expected guidance for its third quarter earnings as it struggles to keep up with intensifying competition in artificial intelligence chips despite booming demand. The company projected that operating profit for the July to September period will jump almost threefold on year to $6.8 billion. But that was still about 10% lower than average market estimates. Revenue is forecast to be at about 17% higher on year, also missing analyst expectations. The South Korean chip giant also flagged a decline in the performance of its device solutions division, which included semiconductors. It said increased competition from Chinese chip makers and a delay in sale of its high-end AI chips to a major customer has impacted its chip business. Samsung's latest 8 and 12-layer AI chips are undergoing quality tests by its US peer, NVIDIA. Its rival, SK Hynix, has already begun supplying its own 12-layer chip to NVIDIA. The company will release a final detailed earnings report at the end of this month. Samsung has acknowledged that there are concerns about its competitiveness and future prospects in an unusually frank statement offering its apologies to customers, investors, and employees. Its newly appointed head of semiconductor business admitted that there had been a talk of a crisis at the chip giant, and the leadership is taking full responsibility for Samsung's plight. He also promised to turn this challenge into an opportunity. Samsung shares ended the day about 1% lower, underperforming the benchmark Kospi index. Year to date, it's more than 20% in the red. Another South Korean firm offering a downbeat outlook, LG Electronics, is projecting a substantial profit drop in the third quarter. The company continues to grapple with rising costs amid a slower than expected recovery in demand for consumer electronics as well as home appliances. LG says operating profit could come in at about $560 million for the July to September period, and that's a 21% drop compared to a year ago. Sales, however, increased 11% to $16.4 billion, marking the firm's largest amount for any third quarter result. Now, LG is due to release its full quarterly report later this month. It blames the weak bottom line on a hike in transportation fees, as well as marketing costs amid rising competition. LG has been working on diversifying its business model as it seeks to keep growing its vehicle component portfolio on steady demand for infotainment products and safety driving features. And shares of LG Electronics ending the day 5.3% in the red. Japan's basic wage growth marked the biggest rise in nearly 32 years. Experts say that fuels hopes that the country may be edging closer to that so-called virtuous cycle between higher salaries and rising consumer confidence. Now, base salaries for regular workers grew at a record pace of around 3% in August from a year ago. And this is expected to provide a tailwind for Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba as he prepares to lead his party into a general election later this month. Now, in a less promising development, rail wages that declined 0.6% after advancing for the past 2 months. Now, rail wages had turned up in June for the first time in more than 2 years as companies bumped up summertime bonuses. The Labour Ministry had cautioned the contribution of such special payments to the data would wane from the month of August onwards. The record rise in base salaries reflecting this spring's negotiation, as well as leading the firms to deliver the biggest pay hike in 3 decades. Sustained wage growth is a prerequisite for the Bank of Japan to raise interest rates again. This after its first hike in 17 years in March and that follow-up increase in July. Remember, Japan's economy expanded by an annualized 2.9% rate based on solid consumption and core inflation remaining above the central bank's 2% target. And most economists believe the economic data is strong enough to support a further rate hike, but the drop in real wage growth could temper the momentum. And that is the latest in business. Otele.
Thanks so very much, Roland. Well, time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, pet owners in China are increasingly willing to splurge in order to travel with their fur kids. We'll have senior consultant Sahiba Puri joining us to help us understand this trend. China expresses full confidence in hitting this year's growth target and unveils plans for $28 billion in spending and investment projects from 2025. The move disappointing investors banking on stronger stimulus from Beijing, cooling the week-long rally in Chinese markets, with Hong Kong's stock market recording its biggest fall in 16 years. And Singapore and South Korea to elevate relations to a strategic partnership next year to mark 50 years of diplomacy with a focus on trade and artificial intelligence. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un says his country will speed up steps to become a nuclear weapons superpower. State media KCNA reported that Mr. Kim made these comments during a speech at a military training facility. Well, he says that the North has no intention of attacking the South. But he also warns that his country will not rule out using nuclear weapons if enemies attacked. Mr. Kim's latest warning comes days after South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol warned that North Korea will face the end of its regime if it tries to use nuclear weapons. Now, Mr. Kim also accused Seoul for colluding with Washington to destabilize the region. Now, North Korea has for decades pursued a nuclear weapons program, and experts believe Pyongyang has enough fissile materials to build dozens of the weapons. Well, South Korea's military has detected signs that Pyongyang has started to build a possible nuclear-powered submarine, adding to concerns over North Korea's push for advanced weapons. Well, a military official said that authorities spotted the building of a submarine that's bigger than existing vessels in a northeastern Sinpo area, where its submarine-related facilities are located. Well, the size of the vessel raises the possibility of it being nuclear-powered. But it's believed the North has yet to acquire a nuclear reactor and other key components for such a submarine. North Korea has recently pushed to acquire advanced naval vessels, unveiling a new tactical nuclear attack submarine in September last year. South Korea's military, however, has said that the vessel does not appear to be ready for normal operations. In January, Kim Jong-un inspected a project to build a nuclear-powered submarine after vowing to develop sophisticated weapons systems in 2021. Now, for pet owners, traveling out of the country is a task fraught with logistical challenges and sometimes emotional heartaches. Finding caretakers, such as pet hotels or friends, come with their own problems. But in China, a new service is emerging to help pet owners with a wanderlust. Well, CNA's Tan Yu-guan has more.
It's a dog's life. That may mean a difficult, boring and unhappy life by definition, but for these dogs, their life is anything but so. Their doting owners have driven nearly 8 hours from Singtel so that these canines could enjoy a 5-day tour of Shanghai. But bringing dogs for a trip like this within China isn't without its challenges.
很多景区不让带小狗，然后酒店也很难找。
To help overcome issues like those, commercial pet clubs have sprouted up in many Chinese cities. This Shanghai tour, for example, is organized by the Cheer Up Pet Club, based in the port city of Qingdao in eastern China. Members of the club pay up to $42 for club fees, and an additional $420 to join the tour for one owner and one pet, with room and tours included.
能接纳宠物的景区，包括酒店，其实真的，哪怕说是很多的大巴，都不是很愿意接待宠物，就是因为狗狗的大小便问题，然后再是狗狗吠叫影响他人的问题。寻找这些，比如说新的一个目的地的时候，我们也努力的克服，去为大家解决。
Xavier and Ella are also in the business of organizing pet tours. But not content with local destinations, the pair set their sights on Thailand. They ended up pulling off China's first overseas pet tour group by plane, chartering an entire flight for 20 pets and 50 human guardians traveling in the same cabin.
全世界来说，也是第一班带宠物包机去旅行的这样子一个动作。检验检疫是很大一部分，这么多宠物，包括到泰国当地，也是跟当地的检验检疫做了深入沟通。那他们会帮我们快速的把这20多只宠物快速的办理，差不多2分钟一只。虽然说泰国是个宠物友好的国家，但是毕竟一个团队有这么多人这么多狗同时到一个空间去，对方还是会有一些意见的，所以前期就需要沟通，都用了有半年时间啊，我们会把每一个细节都落实到位。
Xavier's group toured Bangkok and Pattaya over 9 days. The fee for each participant varies. For example, bigger dogs need 2 seats on the plane. But a typical human guardian and a small-sized fur kit can expect to pay up to $7,000.
In an economy that's facing sluggish consumption growth, goods and services catering to fur kits like Bella seem to defy gravity. In a very recent mid-year online shopping festival, overall sales went down 6.9%. But sales of pet food meant for fur kids like Bella went up a whopping 10%. The consumption patterns reflect changing attitudes towards pets in China, brought on in part by an aging society, sliding marriage rates, and low birth rates.
宠物不仅给我们的生活带来了很多欢乐，它更是我们的家人。现在很多的年轻人把宠物当作孩子，当我们出来玩的时候，家长就想带着自己的宝宝一起出来玩，所以它就应运而生了一个携宠游这个新型的一个活动。
我就把它当孩子养，所以我觉得带着它一块旅游，就是我们全家一起出去旅游，特别开心。
我们一开始的时候在青岛那边，很想带着小狗交一些他们狗中的小朋友，因为我们觉得我们人有好朋友嘛，然后人也有自己的社交，但是狗它没有，它只能是通过我们主人去带着它去发现一些新的朋友。
Xavier too was inspired to go into the pet tour business after bringing his beloved fur kids on adventures, where he eventually met up with his current business partner, Ella. Thanks to the success of their Thai tour, other countries are now knocking on his door.
对泰国之行之后，我们也收到很多中国周边的国家的邀请。我举个例子，比如说韩国的领事馆，他会希望我们带着宠物去韩国旅行，然后体验他们当地的文化。那他们会帮我们解决机场啊、检验检疫啊、酒店啊，还有一些景区各个方面的那些支持。如果我们遇到问题，他们也会帮我们去从中去协调。
So don't be surprised the next time you're at a tourist destination, your fellow tourist might be a dog from China. Tan Yuguan, CNA, Shanghai.
Well, in fact, several more Chinese airlines now offer pet cabin services, allowing pet owners to fly right alongside their furry companions. Now, let's take a closer look at the booming pet industry in the region. And joining us is Sahiba Puri, Senior Consultant at Euromonitor International. Well, thanks, Sahiba, for joining us in East Asia tonight. Well, we saw that from Yuguan's story, many dog owners who are eager to travel with their pets, irrespective of the expenses. Sahiba, what do you think has driven this lifestyle shift?
Well, thank you, Otelia, for having us on board. And I think a very fundamental factor about the increasing spend on pets in general, be it in terms of travel or any other aspect, is this overarching trend of pet humanization. So I think a lot of the interviews that we saw, the one theme that was being relayed was that people think of their pets like their babies. And that's precisely why they want to make sure that they're offering the best for them. They are providing them high quality meals. They are taking with them on these travel adventures, essentially because they want to share the experience with their pet. So all these desires essentially are backed by a willingness to spend, which is why we are seeing not just a lifestyle shift, but also a splurge in the pet economy.
That's right. This pet humanization, as you are talking about, clearly, because of that, the pet economy it has really taken off. You know, aside from travel, I'm wondering, Sahiba, what are the other areas are you seeing growth in? And also, how is that these trends shaping the pet industry as a whole?
So I would say that we are seeing very strong and robust growth coming in from the pet food and even the pet healthcare segment, which is the focus of our coverage at Euromonitor. Now, pet food, within that, we see that the premium segment is actually gaining good traction. People want to make sure that the quality of the food they're giving their pets is as premium as they can. They want to derive health benefits from it directly. So corresponding to that, they are willing to pay a premium for that as well. Now, having said that, I do want to point out that there are some segments that are performing better than the others. So primarily, a lot of cat-oriented categories are performing significantly better. And in fact, when we project our estimates for cat food growth for the next 5 years, we are expecting around a 5% growth in the compounded growth rate. Similarly, when we look at pet healthcare, which includes things like dietary supplements, your flea and tick treatments, etc., This category is projected to grow at a compounded growth rate of about 9% in China. So that really brings to light about how people are putting money behind all that they want for their pets. And the pet food market and I would say the pet healthcare market are really booming in China.
Oh, interesting to note that the cat categories are actually doing better than men's best friend. And I guess it's also the fact that, people are having less children. So, they're having their animals instead and they treat them like kids. I believe that there are a lot of big players in China right now to do with the pet industry. Perhaps, Sahiba, you could help us understand just how competitive is the landscape right now and what's driving that competition.
Sure, absolutely. So I would say at a very pet care top line level, the competitive landscape in China is a bit fragmented. So we do see good presence from both international and domestic players. From amongst international players, you have companies like Mars, Nestle Purina that are some of the leading brands. But we also see good presence amongst the top 5 and even the top 10 from domestic brands. Now, if we look at it at a company level or even a brand level, we see Mars or Royal Canin are actually leading the market. But what is really interesting right now in the competitive landscape in China pet care is that we are seeing a lot of growth coming in for domestic brands. The reason behind this is that even though consumers definitely want to, provide the best for their pets, we have to factor in the economic conditions as well, which are forcing people to budget their expenses, but a lot more in a smarter way. Now, what this means is that they're basically shifting away from international premium brands and looking for domestic brands that can offer them comparable quality and a more value-oriented offering. So I think the competitive landscape of China in the next, say, in the near term, in the next 2 to 3 years, will really be determined by how the economic environment is impacting consumption behaviors.
And we're certainly seeing that, going for domestic brands, even in makeup and sportswear and all of that. Well, thanks so very much, Sahiba Puri, for your time and thoughts, senior consultant at Euromonitor International. Thanks for joining us from Singapore. Well, we're going to go for another short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Japan's new Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba to make his international debut this week at the ASEAN Summit in Laos. Turning to Singapore news now, customers of telco provider Singtel are reporting issues with their fixed telephone lines. The service outage has affected emergency hotlines, including 995 and 999. Other hotlines affected include those run by banks and medical facilities, such as KK Women's and Children's Hospital and Changi General Hospital. SingHealth's telephone appointment lines were also down. Now, the disruption to landlines was first reported around 3 p.m. with 2,500 outages logged at one point. In a Facebook post, Singapore Civil Defence Force is advising the public to SMS SCDF at 70995 if they cannot get through to 995. To reach the police, they may SMS 70999. SCDF adds that the safety and well-being of the public is top priority. And in an update at 5:07 p.m., Singtel says that their engineers have isolated the problem affecting fixed voice services. Recovery measures are being rapidly deployed and services are progressively being restored. Singtel apologized for the inconvenience caused. And for more, our reporter Sabrina Ng, she joins us live now. What is the latest update, Sabrina?
Well, it's an outage that seems to have island-wide implications, right? Earlier, I spoke to several passerbys here at Holland Village, where I am, who expressed their frustrations about not being able to contact their banks or even hospitals to manage their appointments in the early afternoons today. And of course, this outage has several implications for landlines, specifically across Singapore, right? And so some of the, these businesses that I spoke to here at Holland Village have primarily gone cashless And we also heard reports about, e-payment services such as PayNow being affected by this outage. Several of the merchants here that I spoke to said it was business as usual for them this afternoon. Customers were able to switch to alternative methods of payment, such as using their credit cards or debit cards. So for them, they remain largely unaffected. But of course, the same could not be said, as you mentioned, for several other institutions across Singapore, including hospitals such as KKH Women's and Children's Hospital in the east and several hospitals in the west under the National University Health Systems. Now, I understand that as of this hour, all services and phone lines are up and running for hospitals in the west. But for those patients who are having trouble, calling into your hospitals and managing your appointments, you can do so directly by emailing your hospitals or managing your appointments through the various applications related to your hospitals. And of course, emergency services like those who contact the police or Singapore Civil Defence Forces, contingency plans are in place. And of course, the public can contact and look up, those numbers on the various agencies' Facebook if they're facing difficulties.
Well, aside from what you've mentioned, Sabrina, do we know what else is being done to rectify the problem?
Well, about an hour or so ago, we did hear from Singtel that their engineers are working urgently to deploy workarounds and really find out what is the root cause of this issue. So since then, we have heard that the engineers have identified the issue in the fixed voice services, which is affecting the landlines. And of course, we can presume that they are working their best, to resume services as promptly as possible. In fact, we are hearing that majority of the bank services and hotlines are already up and running. And so, those customers who are wishing to call into the banks can probably check it out for themselves. And at this moment, for what we know, mobile services and broadband services are not affected, are still in place. And CNA has also contacted Singapore's government agency that regulates telcos to contact them on what will be done regarding this issue. And we'll bring you the latest when we have it.
Well, thanks very much, Sabrina, in Singapore, speaking to us on Singtel's landline outage. In other news, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba will make his international debut at this week's ASEAN Summit in Laos as he prepares for a snap election this month. He will attend the ASEAN-Japan Summit on Thursday and return to Tokyo early on Saturday. CNA's Michio Ishida has more.
Japan's new leader Shigeru Ishiba will fly out from Tokyo after he dissolves parliament on Wednesday. Observers say the Prime Minister's decision to travel to the ASEAN Summit just about a week after taking office shows the importance he places on ties with the regional bloc, though some also point out he needs to show Japan's presence to counter China, which has been increasingly assertive in the East and South China Sea dispute. Last December, Tokyo hosted the ASEAN-Japan Commemorative Summit to mark 50 years of friendship with the bloc. In Laos, Tokyo will seek to build on their joint statement to promote maritime security cooperation, a rules-based Indo-Pacific that is free and open, as well as improve cooperation in areas including disaster management. At the ASEAN Summit, Mr. Ishiba also plans to promote carbon neutrality, building on the achievements of his predecessor, Fumio Kishida, who hosted the first Asia Zero-Emission Community Leaders meeting last year. Mr. Ishiba will host the second meeting on Friday in Laos, where he will lay out a 10-year action plan and seek to reach an agreement on ways to achieve decarbonization. Mr. Ishiba has been advocating an Asian version of NATO, but this will not be on his agenda in Laos. He has toned down his rhetoric since being elected prime minister, stating in the Diet that it is not a framework that can be achieved immediately. Michio Ishida, CNA, Tokyo.
Well, as heat waves become more frequent around the world, their impact extends beyond physical health. Studies show that rising temperatures can also take a toll on our mental well-being. With the World Mental Health Day approaching, Arnold Gay explains how extreme heat is affecting our minds in ways we may not expect.
Have you ever wondered why phrases depicting anger like blood boiling, letting off steam, or hot-headed all seem to link back to heat? Well, it's not a coincidence. Studies reveal that heat has a real impact on mental health, making these phrases feel more literal than we realize. When temperatures rise, the body works hard to redirect blood flow towards the skin to cool down. Now that comes at a cost. It means less blood flow and therefore less oxygen reaches the brain. Now, this can slow down cognitive processes, making it harder to focus, solve problems, and even remember things. Everyday tasks like working, driving, or even socializing can feel much more challenging in the heat. The effects don't stop there. Heat can also cause a neurotransmitter imbalance in the brain. I'm referring to serotonin, commonly known as the feel-good hormone. It's a chemical messenger that helps regulate mood. Extreme heat can throw off that balance, potentially leading to mood swings or even anxiety and depression. Now, those with existing mental health conditions such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder are especially vulnerable. Experts say high heat can exacerbate symptoms significantly and even trigger new mental health issues. Another factor is poor sleep. Hot nights can disrupt sleep, and sleep deprivation can severely impact brain function. Without proper rest, cognitive abilities, emotional regulation, and mental health, they all suffer. As our world warms, understanding how extreme heat affects mental health is crucial to protecting both body and mind.
The Nobel Prize in Medicine has been awarded to 2 American scientists for the discovery of microRNAs. Now, these tiny molecules in our cells help decide which parts of our DNA should be active and which should be quiet. The findings made by Victor Ambros and Gary Rupkun provides a deeper understanding of how the human body works and could lead to new ways of diagnosing diseases, including cancer.
Was I expecting it this year? No. But it's a lovely thing.
Gary Rupkun was at his home in Newton, Massachusetts, when he got the call informing him that he was one of 2 American scientists who won the 2024 Nobel Prize in Medicine.
If you get a call from somebody in Sweden, answer it.
Co-winner Victor Ambros said he was informed by his son, who received the call from the Nobel Committee by mistake. The pair won for their discovery of microRNA and its crucial role in how multicellular organisms grow and live.
MicroRNAs are important for our understanding of embryological development, normal cell physiology, and diseases such as cancer.
Their work helped explain how cells specialize and develop into different types, such as muscle and nerve cells.
I want to shout out to the world that this is really important. All these things are important.
Ambros is a professor at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, while Rupkun is a professor at Harvard Medical School and also affiliated with Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston.
And that wraps up East Asia Tonight this Tuesday. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia, and you can always find us on Facebook, YouTube, and on X. Thanks for watching.